Kyle Harrison stood in formation with the other Marines, trying not to let his nerves show. He was 24 years old and had never left Earth's solar system until 3 weeks ago. Now he stood on an alien world, surrounded by beings that could probably tear him apart with their bare hands. The Valtorian homeworld looked nothing like Earth. The sky was orange instead of blue, and 3 moons hung visible even in daylight. The palace where they waited was made of black stone that seemed to drink in the light. Everything here was built on a massive scale, designed for people much larger than humans. Kyle glanced at his best friend Danny Cole, who stood 2 positions down the line. Danny gave him a quick nod. They had enlisted together, gone through basic training together, and now served on the same security detail. When Commander Lisa Martinez asked for volunteers to guard the diplomatic mission to Valtoria Prime, they both raised their hands without thinking twice. That was before they knew what Valtorians actually looked like. The aliens were huge. The shortest one Kyle had seen was still 7 feet tall. They had dark scales covering their skin in patterns that shifted from deep purple to midnight blue. Their eyes were large and golden, with vertical pupils like a cat. Each hand had 4 fingers tipped with claws that could retract but never fully disappeared. When they moved, it was with a predator's grace that made Kyle's instincts scream danger. But they were here to make peace, not war. Earth needed allies in the galaxy, and the Valtorian Empire was one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in this sector. If humanity could prove themselves worthy of friendship, it would change everything. Captain Greg Foster, who led their Marine unit, had drilled that into them every day of the journey. No mistakes, no incidents. Be professional, be respectful, and remember that you represent all of humanity. The great doors at the far end of the hall began to open. Kyle straightened his posture and kept his eyes forward. The human delegation stood in the center of the massive throne room, arranged by rank. Ambassador Helen Davis and Commander Martinez were at the front. Behind them were various diplomats and scientists. The Marines formed the outer ring, 12 soldiers in dress uniforms standing at attention. Kyle was in the back row because he was the lowest-ranked person in the entire group. Just a private who happened to be good at following orders. The Valtorian court entered in a procession. Warriors in ceremonial armor came first, followed by nobles in flowing robes that seemed to change color as they moved. Musicians played instruments that sounded like drums mixed with wind chimes. The whole display was designed to impress, and it worked. Kyle had never seen anything so grand in his life. Then the royal family entered, and the music reached a peak before falling silent. Emperor Drachmon was enormous, even by Valtorian standards. His scales were darker than the others, almost black, with lines of silver running through them like veins of metal in stone. He wore a crown that looked like it was made from the bones of some great beast, and his presence filled the room like a physical weight. Beside him walked a female Valtorian who could only be the Empress. She was slightly smaller but no less impressive, her scales a deep purple that caught the light. Behind them came their children. Kyle counted 3 of them, 2 males who looked like younger versions of their father, and 1 female. The female was different from the others. Her scales were lighter, shifting between blue and silver depending on how the light hit them. She was tall and moved with confidence, but there was something else about her, something that made Kyle's breath catch in his throat, even though he didn't understand why. Ambassador Davis stepped forward and bowed in the Valtorian style, pressing her right fist to her left shoulder. Commander Martinez and the others followed her lead. "Great Emperor Drachmon," Davis said in Valtorian, a language she had spent months learning. "We come as friends and seekers of peace. Earth sends its respect to your throne and your people." The translation device on the Emperor's belt converted her words into something the whole court could understand. Drachmon studied the humans for a long moment before speaking. "Ambassador Davis of Earth, we welcome you to Valtoria Prime. Your people are young in the ways of the galaxy, but we have watched your progress with interest. Perhaps there is worth in you that others have not yet seen." It was not exactly a warm welcome, but it was not an insult either. Davis smiled and began the formal introductions, presenting each member of the delegation by name and title. Kyle barely listened. He was trying to control his heartbeat, which had started racing for no reason he could identify. Something felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, but different, like the air before a storm. The princess was looking at the humans. Not at Ambassador Davis or Commander Martinez or any of the important people. She was scanning the group like she was searching for something specific. Her golden eyes moved across the diplomats, the scientists, the senior officers. Then she looked at the Marines. Kyle's heart hammered against his ribs. He kept his eyes forward, trying to remain professional. But he could feel her gaze like heat on his skin. She started walking. Not toward Ambassador Davis, who had paused in her introduction. Not toward any of the people who actually mattered. She walked directly toward the Marines. Captain Foster tensed but held his position. The Valtorian guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons. The entire throne room seemed to hold its breath. The princess walked past the front line of Marines. She walked past Danny, past Lieutenant Harper, past everyone who outranked Kyle. She stopped directly in front of him. Kyle's training kept him still, but his mind was racing. Had he done something wrong? Was this some kind of test? Should he look at her, or keep staring straight ahead? Princess Sirakath was even more impressive up close. She was at least a foot taller than him, maybe more. Her scales caught the light and threw it back in patterns that seemed to move on their own. Her eyes were pure gold, with no white at all. And they stared into his with an intensity that made him forget how to breathe. She raised one hand and pointed at him. Her voice rang out across the silent throne room. Clear and absolute. He is mine. The words hit Kyle like a physical blow. Around him, he heard gasps from both the Valtorian court and the human delegation. He saw Ambassador Davis's face go pale. Captain Foster looked like he wanted to move but had frozen in place. Kyle just stared at the princess, completely unable to process what had just happened. Emperor Drachmon rose from his throne, his expression unreadable. The Empress put a hand on his arm, speaking too quietly for Kyle to hear. Princess Sirakath did not lower her hand. She kept pointing at Kyle, kept staring into his eyes, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. I claim him. By the ancient right of my blood and the laws of our people, I claim this human as my champion. The throne room erupted into chaos. Valtorian nobles started shouting at each other in their own language. The human delegation broke formation, clustering around Ambassador Davis in confusion. Captain Foster barked orders that nobody could hear over the noise. Through it all, Kyle stood frozen in place, still staring at the alien princess who had just claimed him for reasons he could not begin to understand. And deep in his chest, something he had never felt before sparked to life. Not fear, though he had plenty of that. Not confusion, though that was there too. It felt almost like recognition, as if some part of him had been waiting for this moment his entire life. Princess Sirakath lowered her hand, but did not look away from his face. Her expression softened just slightly. And when she spoke this time, it was only for him. Do not be afraid, Kyle Harrison. I have chosen well. She turned and walked back to her family, leaving Kyle standing in the ruins of everything he thought he knew about his future. The diplomatic mission to Valtoria Prime had just become infinitely more complicated. The meeting hall that Ambassador Davis had secured for the emergency briefing was far too small for the number of people trying to fit inside. Kyle sat in a chair that was built for someone much larger than him, his feet barely touching the floor. Around him, the entire human delegation argued in hushed but urgent voices. This is completely unacceptable, said one of the senior diplomats, a man named Richard Hayes. We cannot allow one of our Marines to be taken by an alien princess like some kind of prize. We may not have a choice, Commander Martinez said. She stood near the front of the room, her arms crossed. We're on their world, under their laws. If we refuse, we could destroy any chance of an alliance. So we just hand him over? Danny Cole stood up from where he had been sitting next to Kyle. His face was red with anger. Kyle's not a bargaining chip. He's a person. Nobody is handing anyone over, Captain Foster said firmly. He put a hand on Danny's shoulder and guided him back to his seat. But we need to understand what we're dealing with before we make any decisions. Ambassador Davis stood at the front of the room, waiting for the noise to die down. She looked tired. The meeting with Emperor Drachmon had lasted another 2 hours after the princess's declaration, and most of it had been tense negotiation in a language Davis barely spoke. "I've been in contact with the Valtorian High Priest," Davis said when everyone finally quieted down. "His name is Corvan, and he's agreed to explain their customs to us. He should be here any moment." As if summoned by her words, the door opened. A Valtorian entered, older than the others Kyle had seen. His scales were faded to a pale gray, and he moved slowly, leaning on a staff carved from dark wood. But his eyes were sharp and clear. "Ambassador Davis," the High Priest said in perfect English. "I am told you have questions about the claiming." "Many questions," Davis admitted. "Starting with what exactly it means, and whether Private Harrison has any say in the matter." Corvan looked at Kyle for a long moment. Kyle tried not to squirm under that golden gaze. "The warrior's claim is one of our oldest traditions," Corvan began. "It dates back thousands of years, to a time before the Empire existed. In those days, young warriors would choose champions to fight beside them. The choice was sacred, based not on rank or wealth, but on something deeper." "What does that mean?" Commander Martinez asked. "We Valtorians have senses beyond what humans possess," Corvan explained. "We can perceive the essence of a person, what you might call their spirit or their character. When Princess Sirakath looked at your delegation, she was searching for a specific quality, and she found it in Kyle," Danny said. "No offense to my friend, but why him?" Kyle wanted to ask the same question. He was nobody special. Just a kid from Nevada who joined the Marines because college was too expensive and he needed direction in his life. "That is something only the princess can fully answer," Corvan said. "But I can tell you what the claiming requires. If Private Harrison accepts, he must undergo 3 trials to prove himself worthy of being her champion. These trials will test his strength, his cunning, and his heart." "And if he refuses?" Ambassador Davis asked. The High Priest's expression grew grave. "Refusing a claiming is considered a terrible insult. Princess Sirakath has declared her choice before the entire court. If Private Harrison rejects her, both of them will be dishonored. The princess will never be allowed to claim another champion. She will be seen as someone whose judgment cannot be trusted." "That's not fair to Kyle," Danny said hotly. "He didn't ask for any of this." "Fairness is not the issue," Corvan replied. "This is law and tradition. However, I should also tell you what happens if he accepts and succeeds in the trials." Everyone leaned forward slightly. "He becomes her champion and honored consort," Corvan said. "He will be bound to her, and she to him. He will have a place of respect in the Valtorian court. His voice will carry weight in matters concerning both our peoples, and the alliance between Earth and Valtoria will be sealed not just with words, but with blood and honor." Kyle felt the weight of every eye in the room turn to him. His hands were shaking, so he gripped the arms of his chair to hide it. "What if I accept but fail the trials?" he asked quietly. "Then you will be sent home with honor for having tried," Corvan said. "But the princess will still bear the mark of poor judgment. The political consequences for her would be severe. So either way, she suffers if this doesn't work out," Kyle said. "Yes, she has taken a great risk by choosing you." The room fell silent. Kyle could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. This was insane. Yesterday, his biggest worry was whether he would embarrass himself at the state dinner. Now he was supposed to decide if he wanted to become the champion of an alien princess. "Can I speak with him alone?" Ambassador Davis asked. The others filed out slowly. Danny squeezed Kyle's shoulder as he passed. Captain Foster gave him a nod that somehow conveyed both sympathy and expectation. When the room was empty, except for Kyle and the ambassador, Davis pulled up a chair and sat across from him. "This isn't fair to you," she said. "I want you to know that first. You volunteered to protect a diplomatic mission, not to become part of one. But if I say no, I wreck everything," Kyle said. Right? Davis sighed. It's more complicated than that. We might be able to salvage something with Emperor Drachmon, even if you refuse. But it would be much harder. And honestly, Kyle, I think there's an opportunity here. An opportunity for what? For something unprecedented. Think about it. If you succeed, you won't just be a Marine anymore. You'll be a living bridge between our species. Every decision you make, every word you speak, will help shape how humans and Valtorians see each other. That's more influence than most ambassadors ever get. I'm not qualified for that kind of responsibility, Kyle said. Maybe not. But apparently Princess Sarakath thinks you are. Davis leaned forward. High Priest Corvan said she sensed something in you. Something special. Do you have any idea what that might be? Kyle shook his head. I'm just a regular guy, Ambassador. I'm good at following orders and I don't quit when things get hard, but that's about it. I don't know what she saw in me. Maybe that's exactly what she saw, Davis said softly. Humans have a reputation in the galaxy, Kyle. We're the species that survived on a death world. The people who kept going even when everything was against us. Maybe she sensed that in you, the kind of determination that doesn't show up on a resume. Kyle thought about his life. About growing up poor in a small town where nothing ever happened. About watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep them fed. About deciding to join the military because it was the only way he could help her and make something of himself at the same time. About all the times he wanted to quit but didn't because that wasn't who he was. What are the trials like? He asked. We don't know yet. Corvan said they'll be revealed when the time comes. But Kyle, I need you to understand something. If you do this, you'll be putting yourself in real danger. These trials won't be easy. The Valtorians are testing whether you're worthy to stand beside one of their princesses. They won't hold back. I understand. Davis studied his face. What are you going to do? Kyle took a deep breath. He thought about Princess Sarakath, the way she had looked at him like she could see straight through to his soul. He thought about her voice when she said his name. So certain and sure. Nobody had ever looked at him like that before, like he mattered, like he was exactly what they needed. I'm going to accept, he said. I'm going to do the trials. Are you sure? No. But I'm sure that saying no would be the coward's way out. And I'm not a coward. Ambassador Davis smiled for the first time since the throne room incident. No. You're really not. She stood up and offered her hand. Kyle shook it. Then let's go tell the High Priest. And Kyle? For what it's worth, I think the princess chose well. As they walked back toward the main hall, Kyle felt his fear beginning to shift into something else. Determination. Purpose. Whatever these trials were, he would face them. He would give everything he had. He just hoped it would be enough. In a chamber high in the palace, Princess Sarakath stood by a window overlooking the city. Her brother Varketh stood beside her. You have created quite a problem for yourself, sister, Varketh said, claiming a human. What were you thinking? I was thinking that I finally found what I have been searching for, Sarakath replied. She did not take her eyes off the stars. You felt it too, didn't you? When he stood before me. Hard. Varketh was quiet for a moment. His heart flame burns bright. Brighter than many warriors I have seen. But he is small. Weak compared to our people. The trials will destroy him. The trials will reveal him, Sarakath corrected. And when they do, everyone will see what I already know. Which is. She finally turned to look at her brother. Her eyes were fierce with certainty. That humans are stronger than anyone in this galaxy understands, and Kyle Harrison is going to prove it. The arena of blades was older than human civilization. Kyle stood in the center of the circular fighting pit, surrounded by stone walls that rose 30 feet high. Above him, thousands of Valtorians filled the viewing galleries, their voices creating a sound like distant thunder. He wore light armor that the Valtorians had provided, made from some material that felt like leather, but was stronger than anything on Earth. In his hands, he held a training blade. It was blunt but still dangerous, designed to bruise and hurt without killing. General Thaxcor stood on the raised platform overlooking the arena. He was a massive Valtorian with scales like burnished copper and more scars than Kyle could count. His voice boomed across the space. The first trial tests combat prowess. Private Kyle Harrison will face 3 of our warriors in ceremonial combat. He need not defeat them all. He must simply prove he can stand against them. If he survives for 10 minutes, he passes. 10 minutes. Kyle had been in plenty of training fights before, but never against opponents who were 7 feet tall and twice as strong as any human. 3 Valtorian warriors entered the arena from the far gate. They moved with the confidence of people who had never lost a fight. Each carried a training blade identical to Kyle's. "Begin," General Thaxcor said. The first warrior charged immediately. Kyle barely had time to raise his blade before the Valtorian was on him. The impact of their weapons meeting sent shock waves up Kyle's arms. He rolled with the force, using the warrior's momentum against him, and slipped to the side. The second warrior attacked from his left. Kyle blocked, but the strength behind the blow drove him back 3 steps. His boots scraped against the stone floor. This was impossible. They were too fast, too strong. If he tried to fight them the way they fought, he would lose in seconds, so he had to fight differently. Kyle remembered what Captain Foster had drilled into them during training. When you face a stronger opponent, you use speed. When you face a faster opponent, you use timing. When you face both, you use their expectations against them. The third warrior circled around behind him. Kyle was surrounded now. Exactly where they wanted him. Instead of panicking, he watched them carefully. Studied their movements. The first warrior favored his right side. The second one telegraphed his strikes with a slight shoulder dip. The third was cautious, waiting for an opening. Kyle feinted toward the first warrior, then dropped low and swept at the second warrior's legs. The Valtorian jumped back, surprised. Kyle used the moment to roll out of the circle, creating space. The crowd roared. Whether in approval or mockery, Kyle couldn't tell. The warriors adjusted their strategy. They stopped coming at him one at a time and started coordinating. One would attack high, while another went low. They tried to corner him again and again, but Kyle kept moving. He never stayed in one place. He never tried to match their strength. Instead, he made them work for every strike. He blocked when he had to, dodged when he could, and always watched for patterns. 3 minutes passed, then 5. Kyle's arms felt like they were on fire. His breath came in ragged gasps. The armor was heavy, and the Valtorian gravity was slightly higher than Earth's. Every movement took more effort than it should, but he was still standing. At 7 minutes, the first warrior got frustrated. He charged with a powerful overhead strike meant to end the fight. Kyle didn't try to block it. He stepped to the side at the last possible second, and the warrior's blade hit empty stone. The force of his own swing threw him off balance. Kyle's training blade cracked against the warrior's knee. Not hard enough to injure, but hard enough to score a point. The crowd went wild. Even the Valtorian spectators seemed impressed. General Thaxcor raised his hand. "Time. The trial is complete." Kyle dropped to one knee, sucking in air. His whole body shook with exhaustion. The 3 warriors approached him, and for a moment, he thought they were angry. But the first warrior extended his hand. "You fight with cunning," the warrior said in rough English. "That is worthy." Kyle took the offered hand and let the Valtorian pull him to his feet. As he left the arena, he caught sight of Princess Sarah Cath in the royal viewing box. She was smiling. The second trial came 2 days later, after Kyle had time to recover. They took him to the Crimson Wastes, a desert region far from the city. The sand was red like rust, and the heat was brutal even though the sun was just rising. Nicole Bennett, the human medic assigned to his team, checked him over one last time before the trial began. She was a practical woman in her 30s who had served in combat zones on Earth. "Remember to stay hydrated," she said, handing him 3 water containers. "And Kyle? Don't try to be a hero. If this gets too dangerous, signal for extraction. I'll be fine, Kyle said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. General Thaxcor explained the trial. In the wastes lives a predator called a Rockthar. It is 6 feet long, covered in natural armor, and hunts by scent. You must track it, capture it alive, and return it to this camp. You have until sunset. They gave Kyle a net, a tracking device that would point him in the general direction of the creature, and a long pole with a loop on the end for capturing animals. Then, they left him alone in the desert. Kyle started walking. The tracking device beeped faster as he moved east, which meant he was heading the right direction. The sand made every step difficult, and the heat pressed down on him like a physical weight. After an hour, he found the first signs of the Rockthar. Tracks in the sand. 3-toed and deep. Whatever made them was heavy. Kyle followed the trail carefully, watching for any movement. The Rockthar burst from the sand without warning. Kyle dove to the side, rolling across the hot ground. The creature was even bigger than the general had described, with scales like overlapping plates of metal and a mouth full of curved teeth. It hissed and charged again. Kyle ran, using the pole to vault over a rock formation. The Rockthar followed, but it was built for ambush hunting, not chasing. Kyle was faster in open ground. He needed a plan. Fighting this thing directly was suicide. Even if he had a real weapon, its armor looked too thick to penetrate, but General Thaxcor had said he needed to capture it alive, which meant it was possible. Kyle studied the terrain as he led the creature on a chase. There were rocky areas, patches of harder ground, and sections where the sand was loose and deep. An idea began to form. He spent the next hour setting up his trap. He used the net to create a covering over a pit he dug in the loose sand. Then he laid branches and his spare shirt across the net to disguise it. It was basic, something he had learned in survival training, but it might work. The hard part was getting the Rockthar to chase him to the exact right spot. Kyle positioned himself on the far side of the trap and made noise. The creature's head popped up from where it had been hiding under the sand. It had been stalking him while he worked, waiting for an opportunity. "Come on," Kyle called. "This way," the Rockthar charged. Kyle ran toward the trap, counting his steps. Too early, and the creature would stop. Too late, and he would fall in himself. At the last second, Kyle jumped. His boots hit solid ground on the other side. Behind him, he heard the net snap tight, and the Rockthar's shriek of anger as it fell into the pit. He carefully approached the edge and looked down. The creature was tangled in the net, thrashing and hissing but unable to escape. The pit was not deep enough to hurt it, just deep enough to trap it. Kyle used the pole and the remaining rope to secure the net further. Then, slowly and carefully, he began dragging the whole thing back toward camp. It took hours. The Rockthar was heavy and fought every inch of the way. By the time Kyle saw the camp in the distance, the sun was low on the horizon. General Thaxcor and a group of Valtorian warriors came out to meet him. They stared at the captured Rockthar in silence. "I expected you to fight it," the general said finally. "Most warriors do. They see it as a test of strength. It is stronger than me," Kyle said simply. "So I used what I had instead." One of the warriors began to laugh. Then, another. Soon the whole group was laughing. Not in mockery, but in genuine respect. "Humans," General Thaxcor said, shaking his head. "You think in ways we do not expect. Come. You have passed the second trial." That night, back at the palace, Kyle collapsed in his quarters. Danny brought him food and water. "2 down, 1 to go," Danny said. "You're doing great, man." "I don't feel great. I feel like I got hit by a truck." "Yeah, but you're alive. And you're winning." Kyle sat up slowly. "Danny, what if the third trial is something I can't handle? What if all this was just luck? Then you fail, and you come home." "But Kyle, I don't think it was luck. I think the princess was right about you. You've got something special. The rest of us are just starting to see it." Before Kyle could respond, there was a knock on his door. He opened it to find Prince Varketh standing in the hallway. The princess's brother looked at him with an unreadable expression. "May I enter?" the prince asked. Kyle stepped aside. Varketh walked into the small room and looked around at the simple furnishings. "I came to warn you," the prince said. "Not everyone in the court wants my sister's claim to succeed. There are those who believe humans are too weak to be allies. They will do whatever they can to ensure you fail the third trial." "Why are you telling me this?" Kyle asked. "Because my sister believes in you. And I have learned to trust her judgment, even when I do not understand it." Varketh met his eyes. "The third trial is called the Trial of Truth. It will test not your body but your spirit. Be ready, Kyle Harrison. It will show you things about yourself you may not wish to see." With that, the prince left as quickly as he had come. Kyle stood in the quiet room, his mind racing. 2 trials down, 1 to go. Whatever came next, he would face it. He had no other choice. In her chambers, Princess Sira Kath watched the stars and smiled. Kyle had impressed the warriors. He had proven his cunning and his determination. Now came the true test, the one that would show everyone what she already knew, that his heart was the strongest thing about him. The chamber for the third trial was deep underground, carved from crystal that glowed with its own pale blue light. Kyle stood at the entrance, looking at the circular room ahead. In the center was a raised platform with strange symbols carved into it. High Priest Corvan stood beside him, leaning on his staff. "The trial of truth is the oldest of our tests. It requires no weapons, no physical strength. Only honesty with yourself." "What do I have to do?" Kyle asked. "Step onto the platform. The crystal will read your mind and show you your deepest fear. You must face it and overcome it. How you do that is up to you." Kyle swallowed hard. "What if I can't overcome it?" "Then you will remain trapped in the vision until someone pulls you out. But you will have failed, and the claiming will be broken." The viewing gallery above was full again. Emperor Drachmon sat on his throne, watching. Princess Sarakath stood at the railing, her hands gripped tight around the stone. The entire court had gathered to see if the human would pass the final trial. Kyle took a deep breath and stepped onto the platform. At first, nothing happened. Then the crystal beneath his feet began to glow brighter. The light rose up around him, and suddenly the chamber disappeared. He was standing in a destroyed city. Buildings were collapsed, fires burned in the distance, and smoke filled the air. Kyle recognized it immediately. This was New Seattle, the colony on Titan where his mother had moved to work in the terraforming plants. Bodies lay in the streets. Human bodies. Kyle started running, his heart pounding. He knew this was not real. Knew it was a vision, but terror consumed him anyway. He found his mother's apartment building. The front was blown open. He climbed through the rubble, calling her name. No answer. Just silence, and the smell of smoke. Then he heard crying. A child's voice. Coming from what used to be a school. Kyle ran toward it, and found a little girl trapped under fallen debris. She could not have been more than 6 years old. "Help me," she cried. "Please help me." Kyle grabbed the concrete slab, pinning her down, and tried to lift it. It would not move. He pulled harder, feeling his muscles strain. Still nothing. The girl kept crying. "I can't," Kyle gasped. "It's too heavy." More crying now, from other directions. He turned and saw people trapped in buildings, calling for help. Dozens of them. Maybe hundreds. All looking at him. All depending on him. "You're a Marine," one man shouted. "You're supposed to protect us." "Do something," a woman screamed. Kyle tried to move the debris again. Failed again. He ran to another building, tried to help someone else. Could not reach them. Could not save them. "I'm not strong enough," he said. "Then we die because of you," the little girl said. Her voice had changed, become cold. "You are weak. You always have been. You pretend to be brave. But you know the truth." Kyle fell to his knees. "I try. I always try. Trying is not enough. You are not enough. You never will be. The vision pressed down on him. All his life, he had worried he was not good enough. Not smart enough for college. Not talented enough for anything special. Just average. Just ordinary. The kind of person who gets overlooked. Look at you, the girl continued. You think you can be a princess's champion? You think you can stand beside warriors who could break you with one hand? You are nothing. Kyle closed his eyes. The weight of his own inadequacy felt like it would crush him. Every failure in his life replayed in his mind. Every time he came up short. Every moment he disappointed someone. Then he heard another voice, quieter than the others. His own voice. You're right. I'm not the strongest. I'm not the fastest. I'm not the smartest. The vision wavered. But I don't quit. I never quit. Kyle opened his eyes and looked at the little girl. She was not real. This city was not real. But the fear was real. The doubt was real. And he had to face it honestly. I am afraid of failing people, Kyle said. I'm afraid I'm not good enough. But being afraid doesn't make me weak. It makes me careful. It makes me try harder. He stood up. The city around him started to crack like glass. I can't save everyone. Nobody can. But I can save someone. I can do my best, and keep trying, even when it seems impossible. That's what being human means. The vision shattered. Kyle was back in the crystal chamber, on his knees on the platform. His face was wet with tears he did not remember shedding. The blue light faded. Silence filled the viewing gallery. Then Emperor Drachmon stood. The human has passed the trial of truth. He has faced his deepest fear and emerged with his spirit intact. The court erupted in applause. Kyle stood on shaking legs and looked up at Princess Sarakath. She was crying too, but she was smiling. General Thaxcor entered the chamber and offered Kyle his hand. You honor us with your courage, Kyle Harrison. Tonight we will hold a ceremony to complete the claiming. But as they left the trial chamber, Kyle noticed something odd. A group of Valtorian nobles in the corner, not applauding. They watched him with cold expressions. One of them, a tall Valtorian with dark green scales, caught his eye and smiled in a way that made Kyle's skin crawl. The ceremony hall was magnificent. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and banners representing both Earth and Valtoria decorated the walls. The human delegation stood on one side, dressed in their formal uniforms. The Valtorian court filled the other side. Kyle stood at the center in ceremonial armor that had been specially made for him. It was lighter than Valtorian armor, but still impressive. Decorated with symbols that represented both species, Princess Sarakath approached from the other end of the hall. She wore robes that shimmered like starlight, and her scales had been polished until they gleamed. When she reached Kyle, she took his hands in hers. Kyle Harrison of Earth, she said, her voice carrying through the hall. You have proven yourself in combat, in cunning, and in spirit. I claim you as my champion and honored consort. Do you accept this bond? Kyle's voice was steady. I accept. High Priest Corvan stepped forward with a ceremonial blade. He made a small cut on Kyle's palm, then on the princess's palm. They pressed their hands together, mixing their blood. By blood and honor, you are bound, Corvan declared. The crowd began to cheer. Emperor Drachmon stood to give his blessing. But before he could speak, the hall doors burst open. Lord Zevkar, the noble with green scales, strode in with a group of armed warriors. They wore the armor of the Imperial Guard, but their weapons were drawn. This ceremony is a mockery, Zevkar announced. I will not stand by and watch our empire weaken itself with human sympathies. You dare interrupt the sacred rites? Emperor Drachmon's voice thundered. I dare to save Valtoria from your foolish alliance. Zevkar raised his hand, and his warriors aimed their weapons. Not training blades, real ones, crackling with energy. Captain Foster reacted instantly. Shields up. Protect the delegation. The human Marines formed a defensive line, but they were outnumbered. The Valtorian warriors loyal to the Emperor drew their own weapons. The ceremony hall descended into chaos. Zevkar pointed his weapon directly at Emperor Drachmon. "Your reign ends tonight, old fool. And the humans will be blamed for your assassination." Time seemed to slow. Kyle saw the weapon charging, saw the deadly light building at its tip. He saw Princess Sarakath frozen beside him, saw the Emperor unable to move fast enough. Kyle did not think. He just moved. He threw himself in front of Princess Sarakath as Zevkar fired. The energy blast hit him square in the chest. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and terrible. He felt his legs give out. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the princess's face, her golden eyes wide with horror and something else. Something that looked like understanding, then nothing. Sarakath caught Kyle as he fell. His blood, still wet from the ceremony, mixed with new blood from the wound in his chest. Around them, the hall erupted into battle. Commander Martinez shouted orders. The human Marines, though outnumbered, fought with tactical precision. They provided covering fire while Valtorian loyalists engaged Zevkar's rebels. Prince Varketh appeared from nowhere, his blade singing as he cut through two rebels trying to reach his father. Emperor Drachmon, no longer the stationary target, moved with deadly grace despite his age. "Get Kyle to the medical wing," Sarakath screamed at Nicole Bennett, the human medic. Nicole was already there, her hands applying pressure to Kyle's wound. "He's in shock. We need to move now." 4 Valtorian guards formed a protective circle around them. They carried Kyle through a side door while the battle raged on. In the hall, the fight turned quickly. Zevkar's rebellion had relied on surprise and the assumption that killing the Emperor would create chaos. But the human Marines had trained for ambush scenarios, and the loyal Valtorian warriors fought with fury at the betrayal. Captain Foster's tactical coordination allowed the smaller human force to amplify the effectiveness of their Valtorian allies. Within minutes, the rebels were surrounded. Zevkar himself faced Prince Varketh. They circled each other, blades ready. "You support this alliance because you are weak," Zevkar spat. "I support it because I am wise enough to recognize strength where you see only difference," Varketh replied. Their fight was brief and brutal. Varketh was younger, faster, and fighting to protect his family. Zevkar fell, defeated but alive, to face the Emperor's justice. In the medical wing, Nicole worked frantically to stabilize Kyle. Valtorian doctors assisted her, combining human medical knowledge with their advanced technology. Princess Sarakath would not leave his side. She held his hand, her own still bloody from their ceremony. "You took the blast meant for me," she whispered. "You barely know me, and you gave yourself to protect me." Kyle's eyes fluttered open. His voice was weak. "That's what champions do, right?" "That is what heroes do," she corrected. Emperor Drachmon entered the medical wing, followed by Commander Martinez. The Emperor's armor was scorched from battle, but he was unharmed. "The rebellion is crushed," Drachmon said. "Zevkar and his followers are imprisoned. But Kyle Harrison, you have done more than help defeat a rebellion. You have shown my people the truth about humanity." "What truth?" Kyle managed to ask. "That courage has nothing to do with size or strength. That a species willing to sacrifice for others, even others they barely know, is worthy of respect and alliance." The Emperor placed his hand on Kyle's shoulder. "Rest and heal, young champion. When you wake, we have much to discuss about the future of our peoples." As the Emperor left, Sarakath leaned close to Kyle. "I chose you because I saw your heart flame burning bright," she said softly. "Now, everyone else sees it too." Kyle squeezed her hand weakly. "I just did what felt right." "Exactly," she said. "And that is why you are mine." Kyle woke to soft blue light, and the smell of something medicinal. His chest ached, but it was a dull pain, not the sharp agony he remembered from the blast. He opened his eyes slowly, and found himself in a room he did not recognize. The walls were covered in crystal panels that glowed gently. Medical equipment surrounded his bed, some human and some Valtorian. Through a large window, he could see one of Valtoria Prime's 3 moons hanging in a purple sky. "You're awake," He turned his head and saw Princess Sarah Kath sitting in a chair beside his bed. She looked tired, her scales less bright than usual. But she smiled when their eyes met. "How long was I out?" Kyle asked. His voice came out scratchy. 3 days. The doctors combined human and Valtorian medicine to heal you. The blast should have killed you, but your armor absorbed most of the energy. She leaned forward. "Kyle, you saved my life. You would have done the same for me, perhaps. But I am trained for combat from childhood. You are a young soldier who had never been to an alien world until a month ago. Yet when the moment came, you did not hesitate." Kyle tried to sit up. Pain shot through his chest and he winced. Sarah Kath gently helped him, adjusting the bed so he could recline more comfortably. "What happened after I passed out?" he asked. "The rebellion was crushed. Zevkar and 20 of his followers are in prison awaiting trial. My father discovered the plot went deeper than we thought. They planned to kill him and blame the humans, then use the chaos to seize power and declare war on Earth. That's insane." "Yes. But there are always those who fear change. They saw the alliance with humanity as a threat to their power." She reached out and took his hand. "You stopped them, Kyle. When you threw yourself in front of that blast, you proved to everyone watching that the alliance is real. That humans and Valtorians can trust each other with their lives." The door opened and Nicole Bennett walked in, carrying a medical scanner. "Good. You're awake. Let me check your vitals." She ran the scanner over Kyle's chest and studied the results. The Valtorian doctors did amazing work. "The tissue damage is healing faster than it should. You'll have a scar, but you'll make a full recovery. When can I get out of bed? Eager to get moving? That's a good sign. Give it another day or two. Your body needs rest." Nicole glanced at Sarah Kath and smiled. "The princess hasn't left your side since they brought you in. We had to force her to eat and sleep." Sarah Kath's scales shifted color slightly. Something Kyle was learning meant she was embarrassed. "He is my champion. My responsibility. He's also tough as nails," Nicole said. "I've seen soldiers 3 times his size go into shock from lesser wounds. Kyle here just keeps going." She headed for the door. "I'll let Commander Martinez know you're awake. She'll want to see you." After Nicole left, Kyle and Sarah Kath sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Kyle spoke. "I need to ask you something. When you first saw me in the throne room, what exactly did you sense? Everyone keeps talking about seeing my heart flame or my spirit, but I don't understand what that means." Sarah Kath considered her words carefully. "Valtorians evolved as hunters. We developed the ability to sense the life force in other beings. We can feel their emotions, their intentions, their essential nature. When I looked at your delegation, I was searching for someone specific. What kind of person? Someone who would stand when others fell. Someone who valued others more than themselves. Someone who had known hardship and grown stronger instead of bitter." She squeezed his hand. "When I saw you, standing in the back row, I felt your heart flame burning like a star. You were the lowest ranked person in that room, but your spirit was the strongest. I'm just a kid from Nevada who joined the Marines because he couldn't afford college. You are Kyle Harrison, who faced 3 trials meant to break him and emerged triumphant, who threw himself in front of an energy blast to save someone he barely knew, who shows my people that humanity's greatest strength is not technology or weapons, but heart." Before Kyle could respond, the door opened again. This time Emperor Drachmon entered, followed by Commander Martinez and Ambassador Davis. The Emperor looked different out of his formal robes. He wore simple clothes and moved with less ceremony. But his presence still filled the room. "Kyle Harrison," the Emperor said. "You have awakened. This is good." Kyle started to get up, but Drachmon waved him back down. "No formality needed. You saved my daughter's life. That grants you the right to be comfortable in my presence." Commander Martinez smiled at Kyle. "It's good to see you awake, Private. You had us all worried. I'm sorry for causing trouble, ma'am." "Trouble? You prevented a coup and cemented an alliance. I'd say you went above and beyond your orders." She glanced at Ambassador Davis. "We'll give you the full briefing later. But I wanted you to know that Earth is very pleased with how you handled yourself." "There will be changes," Emperor Drakmon said. "The rebellion showed us that the alliance needs to be stronger, more permanent. My advisors and I have been meeting with your diplomats. We propose a formal treaty, with cultural exchange programs and shared military training. And," Sirakath added, "my father has agreed to resume the claiming ceremony, properly this time, without interruption." Kyle looked at her in surprise. "You still want to complete it, after everything?" "More than ever. You have already proven yourself 10 times over." 2 days later, Kyle stood in a different ceremonial hall, one that was smaller and more private. His chest was still wrapped in medical bandaging under his armor. But Nicole had cleared him for light activity. The only people present were the immediate royal family, the human delegation, and High Priest Corvan. After the rebellion, everyone agreed the ceremony should be more intimate. Kyle and Sirakath stood facing each other, hands joined. The cuts on their palms had healed, but they made new ones for the ceremony. When their blood mixed this time, there was no interruption. "By blood and honor, you are bound," Corvan said. "Kyle Harrison, you are now champion and honored consort to Princess Sirakath of Valtoria. Your voice carries the weight of 2 worlds. Your actions will shape the future of both our peoples." Kyle spoke the vows he had memorized. But this time, he spoke them in Valtorian. He had spent every waking hour of his recovery learning the language with help from Sirakath and the palace tutors. "I pledge my strength to your protection. I pledge my heart to your trust. I pledge my life to our bond. Where you go, I follow. What you face, I face beside you. This, I swear." Sirakath's eyes widened in shock, then filled with tears. She responded in English, which she had been learning as well. "I pledge my strength to your protection. I pledge my heart to your trust. I pledge my life to our bond. Where you go, I follow. What you face, I face beside you. This, I swear." The ceremony completed, they sealed it with a kiss. It was Kyle's first kiss with an alien, and probably the first kiss between a human and a Valtorian in history. It felt strange and wonderful and right all at once. The small gathering erupted in applause. Danny Cole whooped loudly, making everyone laugh. Emperor Drakmon stepped forward. "The alliance between Earth and Valtoria is now sealed, not just in treaties, but in family. Kyle Harrison, you are welcome in my house and my empire. Your people are our people." The celebration that followed was nothing like the grand state dinners Kyle had imagined. Instead, it was a feast where humans and Valtorians sat together, sharing food and stories. The barriers of formality came down, replaced by genuine curiosity and friendship. Prince Varketh sat with Captain Foster, comparing military tactics. Commander Martinez and the Empress discussed trade agreements. Danny somehow got into a drinking contest with a Valtorian warrior twice his size and actually won, earning respect and a wicked hangover. Kyle found himself surrounded by Valtorian nobles who wanted to know about Earth. He told them about his home, about the deserts of Nevada, and the mountains, and the ocean he had only seen once before joining the military. They listened with fascination, these powerful aliens interested in the stories of an ordinary human. Later, when the celebration wound down, Sirakath led Kyle to a balcony overlooking the city. The lights of Valtoria Prime spread out below them like stars brought down to Earth. "What happens now?" Kyle asked. "Now we build something new," Sirakath said. "The Alliance will need ambassadors, people who understand both cultures. You and I will be among the first. I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility." You took a blast to the chest for someone you had known for less than a week. You faced your deepest fears and came out stronger. You learned my language in 3 days just to honor our ceremony. She turned to face him. "Kyle, you have been ready for this your entire life. You just did not know it. I'm still scared I'll mess it up." "Good. Fear makes us careful. And we will face it together." She smiled. That is what being bonded means. You are not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we handle it as one. Kyle looked out at the alien city that was somehow becoming home. He thought about the journey that brought him here. A kid from Earth who volunteered for a simple guard duty and ended up changing the course of history. You know what's funny? He said. A month ago, my biggest worry was whether I'd embarrass myself at a state dinner. Now I'm married to an alien princess and helping negotiate treaties between worlds. Is it too much? Sarah Kath asked quietly. Kyle thought about it. Really thought about it. The responsibility was enormous. The pressure would be constant. His life would never be simple again. But when he looked at Sarah Kath, when he thought about the bonds forming between their peoples, when he remembered the look of respect in General Thaxcor's eyes and the friendship in Prince Varketh's smile, he knew the answer. No, he said. It's exactly right. She leaned against him, and they stood together watching the stars. Two people from different worlds, bound by choice and ceremony, facing an uncertain future with certainty in each other. Behind them, through the window, they could see humans and Valtorians laughing together. Danny was teaching a group of warriors a card game from Earth. Nicole was showing the Empress pictures of her family back home. Ambassador Davis and Emperor Drakmon were already planning the next steps of the alliance. The rebellion had failed. The alliance had succeeded. And at the center of it all was a young Marine who had never expected to be anything special. Who proved that sometimes the most important thing a person could have was not strength, or intelligence, or talent, but the courage to do what was right when it mattered most. Kyle Harrison, champion of Princess Sarah Kath, bridge between Earth and Valtoria, had found his place in the galaxy, not because he was the strongest or the smartest, but because when the moment came, he stood up and refused to quit. And that, more than anything else, was what it meant to be human. The stars above them burned bright, witnesses to a new chapter in galactic history, a chapter written not in conquest or domination, but in sacrifice, understanding, and bonds that transcended species. It was only the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, misunderstandings and conflicts and hard choices. But Kyle and Sarah Kath would face them together, and through them, two worlds would learn that difference was not something to fear, but something to celebrate. The alien princess had pointed at the young human soldier and said he was hers. She had been right in ways no one, not even Kyle himself, had understood at the time, and he had become exactly what she saw in him. Not despite being human, but because of it.